guys, it's Arielle here from Fix My Books, and today we are going to dive into a very special topic in honor of National Bookkeeping Week. So, what is a bookkeeper and what do they do, and should you be a bookkeeper? Basically, this topic will cover everything about bookkeepers and bookkeeping in general. This is basically the bookkeeping Bible if you want to be a bookkeeper, I guess. And this is a video that I wish I had when I was probably, even just thinking of getting into bookkeeping, as this video would be, giving you a great overview of what a bookkeeper does basically generally every day. What skills do you need to have to be kind of successful in this profession, as well as the differences that bookkeepers do versus, maybe what accountants or tax preparers do. And because of that, we are joined today by a very special guest, my husband, Jason.
Hello.
Who is an enrolled agent. So here he is to explain what an enrolled agent is.
So an enrolled agent is able to represent individuals and corporations before the IRS, and that's in an unlimited capacity. So when we say that, there's only three types of people, or three types of professions, I guess, that are able to do that, and one would be an enrolled agent, the second one would be a registered CPA, and the third one would be a registered attorney.
Okay, so more on that later, but for now, let's get started. Okay, so first things first, do you have what it takes to be a bookkeeper? So these are essential skills that, I think you should have if you want to be successful in the bookkeeping profession. So number one, which I think is obvious, is you must be good with numbers. So I'm not saying you got to do physics or algebra or any of that really super complicated
math. There's no
math.
Complicated equations here. It's addition, subtraction, multiplication, division.
It's basically sixth grade math.
Percentages.
Yeah, you just need to know that. And then if you're comfortable with that, that's great. A lot of people get intimidated thinking we're doing some sort of engineering project here or something.
Yeah, there's no physics involved.
Yeah, there's nothing like that. So if you know sixth grade math, you can be a bookkeeper. Next is that you should be very detail oriented and great at following schedules, because you're going to learn this as you go on. Bookkeeping is more of knowing things transaction by transaction, a very, very detailed picture of what the books are. So you need to remember those sorts of things for each client, I'm assuming, or let's say even if you're just working for one person, you're an employee, you need to remember, okay, this certain supplier is where we buy, this type of expense from. So when you see that supplier, it's always that type of expense, something like that.
But not even just each client. It's also by industry. So some industries, this will be something that's put into the cost of goods sold, and other industries this is going to be an expense, and that kind of thing.
Yeah. So knowing that with different industries, so you have to be very detail oriented. That will really help you with bookkeeping. And again, you have to be great at following schedules. For example, payroll. Payroll is set as a certain schedule.
None of these schedules are on your schedule. So just remember they're on other people's schedules and the government schedules.
Yeah. So another example is, let's say, quarterly HST filings. So you need to be on top of those.
The monthly papers.
Yeah. Yeah. So those are just some, important skills to have. Next is you have to be great at communication, right? So bookkeeping, actually accounting as an industry, I guess, is very introverted. Rarely will you see accountants or bookkeepers with YouTube channels. I think there's very, very few of us. But
in Canada, I think it's us and 3 or 4 others.
Yeah,
so.
But you really do have to be great at communication, especially now that everything, is remote, right? You have to be, 99% of the time you're talking to people, quote unquote, talking to people via email. So you have to be clear, you have to be concise, you have to explain things very clearly in a short email saying, I need this, this, and this by this time. I was not great at this in the beginning, and
I'm
this,
definitely not great at it, but you get better at it as time goes along. And the
Yeah.
more that you interact with other business owners,
the more you get used to it.
Especially because they don't have the time to read, paragraph
Yeah.
after paragraph of,
So
like tax law or something like
yeah,
that.
you just have to like kind of explain things to them more concisely and say, this is what I need from you to get this done. If you need to speak about this further, we can hop on a phone call, something like that. But just like a 3-sentence explanation as to why you need a certain thing, something like that, doesn't need to be long. And this is, I think, one of the most essential skills that people really overlook with bookkeeping. Again, because it's a bunch, we are an industry of introverts. And I'll touch on this later on, but this is very important. So if you don't like dealing with people, you want to be alone, you don't want to be bothered, bookkeeping is not for you because you're going to be interacting with a lot of people.
Perhaps if you wanted to be more of a junior bookkeeper where you don't really have a client and you're working under more of a senior bookkeeper that does the interaction with the client, then it may be for you then.
But you will have no career progression.
But you'll be stuck at a lower level and you can't move forward.
Yeah. Next would be the ability to work well under pressure and high stress situations. And I cannot stress this enough.
Tax season.
So bookkeeping, even though if you think about it, we're not really tax people, but we are very much correlated with the tax season. Because why? Because people only get their bookkeepings done when it's tax season, when they have to file. That's the only time they get their bookkeeping done.
Yeah, or when they're getting a letter
audited.
From the CRA.
The love letter from the CRA, And you will notice that bookkeeping is very cyclical. Obviously, it comes along with the schedules, right? So quarterly filings, high stress situation. Tax season, high stress situation. So you need to be able to manage your time well and work well under pressure. I would say with this, it's not super stressful or all year round, but definitely January to April will be very stressful because January quarterly filings, February T4 filings, March is the start of tax season, April is basically supposedly the end of tax season, but tax season really goes on till June because you have business owners.
Yeah, so when you're in tax filing, you'll see that you get a lot of sole prop owners that think, despite the filing deadline being in June, that they don't need to pay their taxes till June, but that's actually incorrect. You need to pay them by April 30. So we
know it doesn't make sense.
So we know, but you get a rush of people coming in May and June, and then they find out when you tell them that taxes were due actually on April 30. They're we got to get this done. We got to get this done, and then you'll get the people that are late for filing in June, so like they're coming in July as well. So it's up until about even August, you may be busy, depending on what level of service that you offer.
Yeah. So I know, we know a lot of accountants that are busy all year round, but they're busy even August, September because corporate tax year ends sometimes are in June.
So what they'll do is they'll try to get people to change their year ends, or when they set up a company for someone, they'll have their year end,
in June.
Yeah, staggered throughout the year. So that way
that
accountant is not flooded, in January with a whole bunch of people saying that they need their tax return done and filed.
Yeah. Okay. And next. So next we go on to daily tasks. So this would be more a day in the life of a bookkeeper, right? This is what you would need to do on the daily. So number one is you're classifying transactions. This would be the thing that people have in their mind that you actually do. So this is it. Number one, you're going to go in, you're going to pull up QuickBooks Online or Xero or whatever accounting software you use, and you're going to start entering those transactions.
Whittling away at that.
Yeah.
Until you can reconcile.
Yeah. And then next would be, depending on what you're doing, I'm just giving you like an overview of a full charge bookkeeper, not like an accounting clerk that like you're stuck in AP or AR or like one area. I'm giving you the daily life of what a full charge bookkeeper will do.
So usually, you'd either be working for a small business and you'd be the only bookkeeper there doing all of this, or you'd be running your own bookkeeping company or sole prop, and you'd be servicing a client in usually a full capacity.
Yeah. So another thing that you would need to do would be, we call it AR and AP, which AR would be accounts receivable. So you're going to be creating invoices, following up with customers who have overdue invoices. Sometimes customers will dispute an invoice, so you'll have to kind of work with them to resolve that. Sending out customer statements, etc. Everything related to accounts receivable. And then next would be accounts payable. So depending on what your accounts payable process is, this might look different, but I will give you an overview of what this will look like with, I would say, 90% of small businesses. You would have an accounts payable software, like something like HubDoc or Dext, collecting all your bills from your suppliers. Then the bookkeeper will sign in to that third-party software, publish all those bills from, let's say, Dex to your accounting software, let's say QuickBooks. And then once it's in QuickBooks, it will be reviewed, double-checked that these are all, we didn't accidentally publish a bill twice, there are no duplicates, blah, blah, blah. And then once that's verified, then you will then go to a third-party payment software like Bluetooth, let's say, where someone will prep the bills. And then usually the person who preps the bills to be paid is not the person who approves bill payments.
Yeah, so you usually want to make that separate anyway.
Yeah, exactly. It's because it's just they're called internal controls to prevent fraud and things like that. Obviously, it will not work if two people are colluding, but this is like the way that people structure this, right? So just so you're aware. Next would be running payroll. This is something, depending on the schedule, you would need to do, daily, weekly, whatever, however big the company is or how many clients you have.
This is where eye for detail really comes in.
Exactly. So if you are doing, and you think it might be simple, but if you're doing like, 100 people's payrolls, all of them are hourly, different timesheets.
And then you've got a holiday.
Yeah, and when you have a holiday, you have to calculate statutory holiday pay. This can get messy really, really quickly. And there are people who don't submit their timesheets on time.
And there are people that resigned.
Yeah, and, there are new hires, and then this person needs commission, and blah, blah, blah. So payroll is a headache, and payroll is the number one thing you should not mess up. I would just say this again, number one thing you should not mess up. You mess up payroll, everyone will know and everyone will get mad at you. This is not something like, oh, you misclassified an expense that it's from advertising, it should be marketing, something like that. That
doesn't affect the bottom line.
This does. You mess up payroll, you mess up someone's paycheck, they're complaining to the boss, and you will get an earful.
You mess this up on Christmas, you've ruined someone's Christmas.
Yeah. So just be very, very careful. Oh, and payroll, that doesn't stop during holidays, guys. Yeah. So this is the thing where like everyone else gets a vacation. It's like 2 weeks of uninterrupted vacation from Christmas to New Year's. You don't get a vacation. Payroll's still continuing throughout the holidays. Because imagine if people don't get paid their Christmas bonuses. Yeah. Like just imagine that.
Not going to be a good New Year either.
Yeah. So payroll is definitely a large part of bookkeeping. And next would be communicating with clients, vendors, and other stakeholders. So this is what I mentioned a while ago that Jason also mentioned, that you have to be good at communication.
Yeah, you really need to be able to talk to people with this, and just be nice to them. If they're a bit lost or they don't understand something, it doesn't mean come back and be really rude via an email. Just pick up the phone and speak to them, because most of the time we've noticed that when you just pick up the phone and speak to whoever's on the other end, the situation can be resolved really quickly, as opposed to emails bouncing back and forward.
Yeah, and try to not take things personally, or like don't think that what they're trying to do is malicious. Don't, like, if let's say you're disputing a statement, it could just be an error. Don't always think people are trying to, do bad things to you, or things like that, because you never want to assume. I've seen it happen where the other person assumes like, oh, they're trying to get away with something, but the other person really was just confused and didn't understand the situation. So, always give the benefit of the doubt, again, and act in good faith.
And just as an example, say your client is, one of the customers of this person you need to speak to, and there's some mess up with the invoice or whatever. They may not have messed up just your invoice. They may have messed up thousands of invoices.
Yeah.
So they're probably having a pretty bad day.
Yeah, and with this also, like, communicating with outside, you're communicating not just with your clients, you're communicating with other people's clients. Think about that. Like, you are also a kind of like a face of their business.
Yeah, you're representing their company as well.
So just, align yourself, be professional. I know, like, some people get comfy because, a lot of bookkeepers are work from home, but just keep that in mind and always act in good faith. And I just want to note here that sometimes also, especially when a client has had a very horrible experience with a previous bookkeeper, they come off like one single thing. Yeah, it's not even an issue. They want a clarification on something, and they come off really harsh.
Yeah, just say, for example, that they're used to seeing this expense in office expenses, and then you put it in the correct bucket, which was, like a software expense line or something like that.
Yeah.
Right? That they may come off as really aggressive at first, saying, oh, why is it in this bucket? And then you just explain it to them, and usually that will be enough.
Yeah, and I've also noticed that those who, I would say, have been traumatized by previous bookkeepers, they have a lot of
pent-up frustration.
Yeah, pent-up frustration, and kind of...
Because they want to yell at that previous person, right? They want to say, why did you screw up my tax return?
Yeah,
or
but
why
like,
did you
they
screw
can't.
up my books?
Yeah, so like that kind of frustration gets put towards you instead. So just know
don't
that
take
as
it personal.
well. Yeah, don't take it personal. I say don't take it personal, but like sometimes I do. I get really sad.
Yeah, she gets upset.
Okay, so these are not like daily tasks, but these are some regular tasks.
But they're all very important.
Yeah, these are all obviously like important. So payroll, tax, remittances. So this is like, depending on your schedule, it could be more than, but usually it's once a month. HST or PST and/or PST return filing, again, depending on your schedule. WSIB and/or EHT filing if you're required. And T4 and ROE filings as needed. So T4 is once a year, and ROE filings is whenever it's needed. So these are some regular tasks that you will need to do, not on the daily, but again, pretty fairly regularly.
But on number 6, most of the time the bookkeeper is going to be filing these. However, if it is a complex client where they've got like exempt, HST,
sales,
and
a sales mix.
Yeah, this really weird sales mix, then probably the accountant may want to file it, depending if that's, their area of expertise.
Yeah, or I would say whoever, this should be negotiated beforehand, but like whoever has the most expertise in this should be the one filing it. I've seen bookkeepers do a good job with this, and I've seen accountants not do such a great job with this, and vice versa. So whoever is the one who actually knows the rules with this should be the one filing. Again, if it's fairly straightforward, that's not an issue, but there are some industries that we've handled, especially like healthcare.
Healthcare is a big one.
Yeah, real estate also is a big one.
Or even e-commerce. I mean, that's something that we know back to front. And
yeah,
when it comes to that, you see some accountants where they're, it doesn't matter if it's CPA or not, tax preparer or whatever.
If they're not familiar with it.
Yeah, they're not grouping inside and outside Canada sales. They're just throwing it all into Canada sales, which is really going to screw up their HST return.
You'll get flagged for review.
You'll get flagged immediately for that.
Yeah, so again, fairly regular. Just know you have to do these. Okay, so next would be stakeholders. These are just people you need to communicate with very regularly. So as we mentioned, one of the essential skills of being a bookkeeper is being good at communicating with others, and this is why. These are all the people you will need to talk to on a regular basis. Number one, if you're a bookkeeping employee, your bookkeeping manager or supervisor, or if you have your own business, then your clients, you will have to be talking to them on a regular basis. Number two, other accounting professionals. So again, if you are an employee, you would have your supervisor, your manager, your controller, CFO, etc. But even as an independent bookkeeper running your own business, I can't tell you how many accountants we work with.
Yeah, dozens.
Yeah, exactly. So even if we're doing the bookkeeping, we're talking to their accountant, sometimes we have to talk to their, not just accountant, but like if they're a really large or, wealthy client, they have someone managing their trust and things like that.
Yeah, and you may be talking about several different accounts to several different departments within a really big accounting firm.
Yeah. And then next, so other management professionals, so they're not exactly accounting specific. I mean, a CFO is, but let's say people in HR, we work,
people,
yeah. So we work hand in hand. So even though technically, like the payroll is handled by the accounting department, a lot of things go into payroll. So comp and benefits, that's handled by HR.
Yeah.
Usually paid time, time off, tracking that handled by HR.
Vacation pay, etc.
So we need to know. So you can see how new hires, right? It come from HR. So you can see how all of these kind of work together in this function to make this, business work, let's say.
Yeah, and just make sure that when you're dealing with these people, that when you're setting up new systems, that you really go over whether or not the system is correct, because the worst thing you want to do is start a system. So say, for example, start onboarding people onto payroll and you don't have a checklist of things or items you need from that individual. And, you're filing payroll and you haven't even got their SIN number or something like that. And it's just going to be a nightmare and it's wrong. You can't do that anyway.
Yeah. Next would be clients and vendors. Again, this would be, the clients of your clients, if they have any questions about any statements you send out. And vendors like billing clerks. Again, if you're like disputing an invoice or something, or your statements don't match with their records or whatever, you're going to have to work with a lot of third-party people to make sure that your books are good, everything is reconciled.
This is very, very common when you're outside of the services industry. So when you're dealing with industries like, say, for example, they make furniture or they make, random things in the house, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I think this is where Jason's expertise will really shine. So bookkeepers versus tax preparers. What we do that's kind of similar and what we do that's kind of different. So maybe Jace can take this one.
Okay, so number one, the bookkeeper is usually way more regular. So on a monthly basis, they'll be interacting with the client, whereas a tax preparer, they may come in only at the end of the year to look at the books, and they won't be as familiar with the books as a bookkeeper will. So a bookkeeper will know the books back to front because they entered all the data. Mm-hmm. The tax preparer will usually come in and say, oh, we might want to move this line, we might want to move these expenses to this item. Mm-hmm. And yeah, but it doesn't mean that they're less important or they won't know the customer as much, because when it comes to filling out the tax return, they'll know, okay, this item we can't really put in this line. Well, that's why we need to move it here. Number two, with HST returns. So the bookkeeper and the tax preparer can file this, but most of the time it's going to be the bookkeeper filing the HST return. Unless, of course, it's, like it's a small sole prop client, they have a small amount of HST, then they may not even have bookkeeping. The tax preparer will just compile the books, a very basic set of books, as well as file the HST return. When it comes to the tax returns themselves, the tax preparer or the accountant will usually file this. Now, the difference between a tax preparer and a CPA is essentially a designation and differences in training. So a tax preparer will mainly be skilled in, especially when it comes to enrolled agents, like tax law and how to actually fill out the crux of a tax return. And an accountant may be really well trained in GAAP accounting, and so they'll understand the theory and the premise of accounting so much more, but they may not be able to fill out a tax return more. But that's not, exclusive. Like they both have their strengths and their weaknesses. And when people go to get their tax returns done, I just recommend go with somebody that you trust. It doesn't matter about whether or not they're a CPA, or it doesn't matter if they're really hyper skilled tax preparer. Just go with someone that you're comfortable with.
And also with this, regarding the tax returns, there are different types of financial statements that can be made, but only one tax return. I just want to clarify that. So the tax return that a tax preparer and an accountant will file will be the same tax return, but the financial statements that you get along with that tax return can be different types of financial statements. For example, one is just compiled financial statements, which is the most common type of financial statements given with the tax return. Next would be reviewed financial statements. So this is a step up from compilation, meaning they've probably spot checked a couple of receipts and everything looks good. And then the most intense type of financial statements that you can get,
probably
which very rarely you will see this unless you have like a publicly listed corporation or something.
Yeah, or it's been required by a
bank or something,
bank
like
or
that.
a debt holder within the company.
Would be audited financial statements. So audited financial statements means they went line by line, expense by expense, and viewed every single receipt with those financial statements. So again, 3 different types of financial statements, only one type of tax return. Don't get confused with this. People get confused all the time.
Yeah, and when it comes to tax returns as well, just note that what you see on the tax return, in your Schedule 125, may be vastly different from what you're used to seeing in the books. And that's because of, differences like, for example, with Giphy codes, which are the itemized codes that make up the lines on the tax return. But just know that when you get your financial statements, they're probably going to be different from what's inputted into the tax return. And that's where the tax return, the tax preparer, and the accountant's job comes in.
Yeah, and again, this is usually because of things like meals and entertainment, right? Only 50% of that is actually claimable on your tax return, but you have to show 100% of the expense on your financials.
Yeah, so don't get alarmed when you say, "Oh, why am I not?"
This is the number one question we get, like, "Oh my God, why is it so different?" And I'm like, and then we have to explain, "Oh, you can only claim this." Like, these are 2 different things. So those are just some of the discrepancies between those 2. Next would be...
So bookkeeping versus tax preparer. Now, this is kind of like macro and micro. So bookkeeping would be micro. So they're really into the fine details, line-by-line transactions, which then feed into the bigger picture of what the tax preparer or the accountant does, which is the tax planning and building out the tax return and filing the tax return.
I think a good example for this would be for you to just understand the difference. Let's say a client gets an HST audit, right? The tax preparer will get the letter and they'll go over it and they'll say, okay, so this is what they're targeting. Generally, let's say they're trying to target, let's say the travel expenses, right?
That's a common one.
That's a common one. And also you can see how, okay, the tax preparer will be like, okay, they're targeting our travel expenses, and then they're gonna go make a game plan based on that. The bookkeeper's role when they get the audit letter is to get all the specific documents in that audit letter ready for the tax preparer to review, prep, and make an audit response letter.
Yeah.
So you see how the details, the line by line transaction, the documents are going to be gathered by the bookkeeper, but the tax preparer will be the one to respond. So
Yeah.
big picture strategy with the audit. So I hope that makes it clear.
But when it comes to this as well, you know, the bookkeeper and the tax preparer can sometimes actually be the same people. It just depends on what you want to do within your own company or what your situation is, because that's why we do tax preparation as well, because we see people wanting not just bookkeeping, but they also want tax preparation to go hand in hand. They want it all in one place. Whereas if you're dealing with a place like, for example, the United States, where I do enrolled agent stuff, that's very much separate. So bookkeepers are different from payroll people, which are different from tax preparers, which are different from CPAs. Everyone has their own specific job, and it's more siloed. Whereas
Canada's kind of more like an all-in-one.
Yeah, they want everything in one place 90% of the time.
Yeah. Okay, so we get, I guess, to the meat of it, the job outlook for bookkeepers. And this is something that not many people know.
And it's starting to come into the news. And this is both, so just disregard the pay statistics, but this is both the situation in Canada and the US, so the entirety of North America. And it's starting to come into the news now that there is a shortage, that there really are not people available, that there are not many people with the certain required skill level, that a lot of people with the skill level are leaving, and that the new entrants into the industry are lower in number, but also they're theoretically based and not practically based, so they don't have the required skills.
Well, they don't have the work experience.
Yeah, they just don't have any work experience.
So I just kind of want to rewind a little bit to how we got to this point. So the job outlook for bookkeepers is great. Let's just say that right, out of the gate. It's great because this is an old industry, meaning it's not something like old, meaning this industry, like accounting, has been around for a very long time.
Since the inception of people running their own trades.
Exactly. Right? This is not like a new industry like online ads that really only started recently, like social media.
It's been around longer than the Medicis. So.
Exactly. So this is an old industry. And with that, there's a lot of things that are old, meaning like ours, we only became like online computerized in the last, I would say, decade, right?
And it really was pushed during
COVID, yeah. You would not imagine the number of people, they have like computerized books, but it's all on desktop, housed in like someone's desktop that you cannot get access to. Like this industry really only became online during COVID. So just think about that. And the average age of a bookkeeper, and I checked this out when I was not even a bookkeeper yet. This was like 2017. I was thinking of getting into bookkeeping.
Yeah, it's like as full charge, not just doing ARAP anymore.
Yeah. The average age of a bookkeeper in North America was 60 years old when I searched it in around 2018. So plus how many years now?
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah. They're all in retirement age. And so there's a lot of people exiting and not enough people entering. So what that's doing, if you look at, I'll just jump to number 3 here, is you can see it's pushing up the prices of the service because there are just not enough people, for one. And number 2, the skill level required is low, so that's also pushing up the prices for high skilled people.
Yeah. So the job outlook is great. The number 2, it's a stable career even during recessions. Like
you'll always find work.
Exactly. Like you can't just tell the government, sorry, I'm not filing my taxes this year, you
so
know?
it's always around
Yeah.
death and taxes, you know. But not just that, it doesn't have as much volatility as what you'd experience in a very cyclical sector of the economy. So, for example, if you're working in tech or if you're working in the retail industry, you can see how the business cycle affects them much, much more. Like, so for example, when interest rates started tightening and you see just costs of everything going up and business starting to slow down from what was going on in 2021, you see a lot of the retail sales just gradually slow over time. But when it comes to bookkeeping, you just constantly have that work, right? Irrespective of whether businesses are slowing down or not. You just don't experience the cyclicality. So it's quite good like that.
And I would also say here, you get a bit of the boom, but not really much of the bust. Meaning, when things are going well for those highly cyclical industries, like let's say retail, they're hiring bookkeepers, right? So throughout COVID, a lot of people started businesses. So that came with more demand for bookkeeping. And, when things, start like with downturns, like what's happening now with the real estate market, we are being affected, like the bookkeeping industry. I'm sure there are people out there who are, getting probably less inquiries because there are less people doing business out there. But it's not like you're 100%, oh, just no more sales or like no more new clients, right? During a downturn.
Yeah, you just don't get the volatility,
Yeah.
which is what we're trying to say. And it gives you peace of mind because it's very similar, like, when you work at a bank or when you work for government. You just don't experience the tumultuous effects of what happens, outside in the real world as much as, other businesses. But the thing is, though, is that you may be servicing a bunch of these businesses and you see the effects of what's happening in the economy and you see firsthand how it's affecting people's lives. And it can be a bit disconcerting.
Next is, again, the pay has been pushed up because of how many people have retired, COVID, inflation, whatever. You can see that in the last 3 years, the bookkeeping, this is the average salary has gone up 25%. So higher pay, it's even going to get better as time goes on. Again, just because everyone's retiring. No one has the skills. So the people who do are going to get higher pay compared to everyone else.
And this comes back to the first point that we were saying at the very beginning of the video, that you have to be good with numbers, but you can see straight away that it's 25%. You don't need to work it out.
Okay, next, if you don't like working for someone else, you can always start your own business. That's what's great about it.
Yeah, it really is. It's quite easy to start a bookkeeping business as well, because your overhead is not massive. So it's not like when you're starting a retail business and you have to do a fit out for a physical
Cash
store.
outlay.
Yeah, or if you're having to purchase a bunch of goods on consignment and then sell those, it's not going to be a massive dent to your balance sheet. I mean, we started Fix My Books with, I think, $3,000.
That was our startup capital,
Yeah.
and that was the only capital we've put into the business.
Yeah,
Everything
else is grunt work.
Yeah. Sorry, guys. We have a new puppy.
Yeah, that's his alarm to
That's
be
his
walked
alarm.
because it's very early in the morning.
Okay, but don't worry. We'll continue through this video. Sorry, Bane. We'll continue the video first. Okay, so the future of bookkeeping. So a lot of people are kind of scared because they think that bookkeepers will be replaced by AI, but I don't think so. I don't think we will be replaced by AI. And let me tell you why. Because for bookkeepers to be replaced by AI, right? It means that every business owner out there will need to be 100% perfect and never put a personal transaction on their business accounts.
And also, different items are claimed in different ways depending on the industry. But for example, for AI to actually work in really taking over the industry would be for banks to collude to come up with some sort of coding system for every single vendor that's going to be running through their statements.
Yeah.
And then for the software companies like QuickBooks or /Intuit to be then generating codes based on that to input into their data, and then mixing it with the industry codes so that kind of aligns correctly with the tax return.
Industry.
And this, so what you're seeing here is a lot of people having to collude together in order to cooperate together, really, to make something work. And
I don't think they will cooperate.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of these people will cooperate, because it would require them, number one, divulging financial data between themselves, and that may be an issue. But also, just the fact that people struggle to cooperate on this magnitude. With this much data would be fairly difficult to accomplish.
Yeah. So number one, we will not be replaced by AI.
Anytime soon.
Number two is advanced software. So even though now bookkeeping, we have, things like QuickBooks and everything's online and things like that, I think there will be more and more advanced software moving forward, and we will be doing less of maybe the data entry and things like that, and leaving that more to advanced software. But what I think bookkeepers' role will be is to be programming the advanced software. That's how I think it would be. If they're going to create advanced software, there's going to be a person having to teach that software specifically for that client. And maybe that's what the bookkeeper's role will be in the future.
And then also on top of that, the more software and the more complicated software that comes out, especially if it doesn't communicate with other software like we see on a regular basis, you're right. Like, the bookkeeper's job will be to learn this software, help implement it into the business, and understand how it works, because the manager doesn't want to sit there, the
business owner,
the client or the business owner doesn't want to sit there learning all this new software for a financial aspect that he doesn't really understand, and he doesn't have the time to understand, or she doesn't have the time to understand. But it's going to be the account controller or the bookkeeper or someone in that department's job to learn this and how to integrate it.
Well, we kind of do this now for some clients.
Like, we do this pretty regularly.
I mean, we set up their QuickBooks Online account for them. We set up their A2X account. We're the ones that make the software talk to each other. So we kind of do that on a small scale now. But in the future, I think that will be even more in bookkeeping.
And even within our own business, you know, a lot of the software that we have, my job is integrating it between each other so it reads, using different types of automations.
Okay, number 3, and maybe you guys have kind of realized this, or maybe we've hinted about this just, based on this video, is multi-jurisdictional bookkeeping. So we are in Canada, but as Jason, my husband, is an enrolled agent in the US, he can represent in the US, even though we do bookkeeping in Canada. So you can see how jurisdictional kind of bookkeeping will be the future, especially with all these online companies on Shopify. Really, the lines between where businesses are located and where their bookkeepers are located is really blurred. Yeah.
And that feeds also into being remote only. So a lot of these people in this industry will stay remote only. I don't think many of them want to go back into the office. And that's because the older generation, they're starting to retire now. And the younger generation coming through that are leaving university or getting skilled in their early 20s at work, they're thinking, I don't want to go back into the office. Obviously, you'll still have the larger companies that hire internally for bookkeepers. They will likely have to go to the office. But the more bookkeeping is outsourced and the more that people set up their own bookkeeping businesses, that's determined on them, whether or not they want to go into someone's office. And we're seeing that a lot of these, there's a lot of bookkeeping franchises out there that still sell on the basis of that person is physically going to drive to you and count your receipts. We're seeing that gradually disappear as more people they don't want to buy into the franchise. They want to set up their own thing because they don't want to go in.
But even employees ask for hybrid. Like they do not want to go in, especially with bookkeeping, because you can do like 99% of the work from home, really. Like
unless it's a security reason.
Yeah, exactly. So I really think the future will be remote only. Okay. And then last but not the least, these are just some things to note with the profession that maybe no one else will tell you this except us, and we didn't even really know this until we got into the profession.
This is what you find out as you go along.
Yeah. So bookkeeping is very underappreciated, and it is very much a thankless job. Meaning, okay, when you're doing your job correctly, 100% perfect, no one will say thank you. No one will be like, oh, you're doing a great job. They just expect things to run the way they run. It's like an airplane. You expect it to take off and land, right? But if something goes wrong, then everyone's freaking out, blamed, right? It's the same thing, right? With the plane. Like if the door blows while you're on air, like everyone's freaking out. Same thing with bookkeeping. No one notices you unless there's a mistake, because that's what they'll see.
Yeah, especially in payroll. So if you do have a bookkeeper out there, probably buy them some flowers and say thank you, and we appreciate the work that you do, because that really does go a long way.
Yeah. Next is that people think bookkeepers are not skilled, that they just do data entry. There is a difference between just data entry and bookkeeping, and I really don't like this myth, but I understand where it comes from. I mean, when I search online, like the word, bookkeeper, let's say on Upwork, there are 1,000 things that come up at like $5 an hour or whatever. And that kind of cheapens bookkeeping in general, because people just think it's data entry, but it's not the same. So just know that people have that impression that bookkeeping is not a skill, it's just data entry. And some people will belittle the type of work that you do.
Yeah, this is very, very common. They'll say, well, it's just this. And it's like, well, if it's just this, why didn't you just do it? And, I don't like to be like that, but it does come up sometimes because it's just very rude. And also, when it comes to bookkeeping not being a skill, well, I'd like to challenge them to make sure that their Shopify store is 100% accurate in terms of the sales receipts and everything going into the GST bucket.
Yeah.
Because the number one type of client that we actually receive is someone that has done the bookkeeping themselves or paid for a very cheap bookkeeper from who knows where, on Fiverr or Upwork or whatever. The majority of work that we get is fixing other people's bad work because they weren't actually skilled.
Yes. Oh, and also be careful of the bookkeeper you hire. Just a little tidbit, if you're a business owner and you're looking at this, bookkeepers who are in Canada, most of the time they would be able to file things for you because they have representative IDs with the CRA. Bookkeepers who are outside of Canada cannot get that. So just be aware that the person that you're paying to do the bookkeeping may not be able to file anything for you.
Yeah, we've had people not want our services and then come back to us and say, oh, well, we got someone online, but can you file this for us? It's like, no.
We cannot.
If you're thinking of starting a bookkeeping business and someone approaches you like that, don't be filing things that you didn't do yourself.
Yeah. Okay. And then number 3, and I don't think most people realize this, but everyone relies on bookkeeping. So bookkeeping is very much related to data and the company's financials, right? So if the person entering the data is not skilled or is entering the data wrong, then garbage in, garbage out. That You know,
Yeah,
I've
the tax
seen
return is going to be wrong. Everything that's filed is
yeah,
wrong.
but I've seen people where they'll like in some companies they'll pay like $15,000-$20,000 for a CFO thinking that this will solve their problems, and it's like, well, your CFO can't do anything if your data is garbage.
Yeah, we've actually seen this quite a bit.
Yeah. So before you start paying like a super expensive like CFO, double check your bookkeeper if they're doing things correctly, and see if your bookkeeping is being done correctly.
And the way that if you're a business owner, the way that you'll know if the bookkeeping is being done correctly is, say, for example, you then give the books to another accountant outside. If the accountant comes back with adjusting journal entries that are less than a page and they're just tiny things like adjusting for
Depreciation or
which,
foreign exchange rate.
foreign exchange, or what's another one? The accounting fees. If that's the only things on their adjusting entry, your bookkeeper is excellent. So the shorter the adjusting entries,
the better
your bookkeeper.
Yeah. So everyone relies on bookkeeping, although it is very thankless. So just know that you're a very important member of the team, but you're often overlooked.
Yeah.
Number 4, bookkeeping is unregulated. Anyone can call themselves a bookkeeper. So
This is good and bad.
it's good and bad because the barrier to entry to be a bookkeeper is very low, but it's also bad because basically anyone can just call themselves a bookkeeper and there's really no quality control in terms of that title. So I guess that's why a lot of people have this bad impression that bookkeepers only do data entry. But with any industry, there's always going to be good and bad people. And with this, we do not want bookkeeping to be regulated.
Yeah, we don't want more regulation. We actually want
less.
We want people to come into the industry and start themselves, whether that means people doing things incorrectly or not. And the reason why is because what you're seeing in the States at the moment, as well as in Canada, is the high exit rate of people with a CPA designation. Now, the problem is that they've built up the CPA entry requirements to be so high that people are simply not doing it. They're refusing to enter the industry, and that's creating problems because you just have no one with a CPA designation at that point. So they're in talks at the moment in several states to reduce the requirements of the CPA designation because they're just frankly over the top. And that's why we don't want further regulation in the industry, because it allows people to change their lifestyle. So for example, if they were working, a different type of career and they didn't like that career anymore and they want to change and become a bookkeeper, well, more power to them. We want more people in the industry.
Yeah. So anyone can call themselves a bookkeeper, which is great. But if you want to call yourself like me, I'm a certified professional bookkeeper, that title is actually regulated.
Enrolled agent.
Or enrolled agent, right? That title is actually regulated. So just know the difference between those two. You can call yourself a bookkeeper, but you cannot call yourself like a certified professional bookkeeper unless you've or a CPA or something like that, unless you've taken the exams. So,
but again, just on that doesn't mean that a person with a CPA or
is
CPB
better than someone who doesn't have.
Someone doesn't have that designation, and it's because we've seen people with 20, 30 years experience in the industry
without the official CPA title.
They don't want to get these designations because they know that their work speaks for itself. They work on referral only. They have a huge wait list.
Yeah. So the letters behind your name it does not define who you are, or it does not define how far you can go in this industry.
Yeah, this is coming from someone that has so many letters behind their name that I don't actually include all of them. So
yeah. So hopefully this video was comprehensive and you guys learned a lot during this video. We unfortunately have to cut it short because I think you guys can hear our puppy Bane is really being such a drama queen at the moment.
Yeah, it's walk time.
Yeah. So once again, this is Arielle from Fix My Books.
And Jason.
And we hope you have a great day.
Cheers.
Hey guys, it's Ariel here from Fix My Books. Thank you guys so much for watching this video and helping my YouTube channel grow. If there are any videos you want to see on my channel, please don't hesitate to comment them down below. I always listen to your feedback. And once again, this is Ariel from Fix My Books, helping you fix your books.